Hey, and welcome to the podcast. We are in week 2 of our series for the month of February, and that is leading people, not programs. And so last week, if you missed it, we talked about relational ministry. We talked about kind of this idea of a mid-year reality where January is like this new energy, new hype for things. Like kids are excited to come back from Christmas break. Then you get into February, and February is this kind of lull. There's really not much going on other than sports. The calendar really isn't fresh anymore, and so there's these different things that are kind of going on. And so we talked about how programs need to be this support structure. They're not a substitute for discipleship. And we talked about the ins and outs of how do we practice relational faithfulness. And just basically this idea and this challenge that maybe we need to rethink the idea of programs or rethink the idea of how we are centering our programs or our ministries. And we need to recenter around the role of relationship and how relational ministry still is everything. And we're kind of continuing on that theme for today. And the big part of relational ministry is the fact that you have to earn trust with students. And so that's the topic for today is earning trust with students over time. And kind of the idea behind this is I actually had this conversation last week, the day after we recorded our podcast last week. Just this idea of, the life expectancy of youth pastors. And I typically hear 18 months. That seems to be the going average. But I heard someone say 9 months.
I've heard 8 to 9.
And I was like, that's not even a job. That's a what? And so this idea of like, if you want to build a successful and a vibrant, growing relational ministry, you have to have trust. But the problem is that trust is built through consistency, trust is built through integrity, and staying power. It's not about charisma, it's not about relevance, it's about you being there for people for the long haul. And so when students learn how to trust you, they will begin to enter into that relational ministry, and then you can begin to work on helping them through their problems, but they have to be willing to open up to you first. And so with that, why trust is a huge deal is trust precedes influence. So if you want influence in someone's life, they have to trust you first. And so in youth ministry, it's really, really easy to assume that if students like me, they'll listen to me. If I'm relatable, I'll have influence. And if the room has energy, discipleship is happening. It's not. That doesn't mean anything. And so students don't grant influence quickly. As a matter of fact, they observe, they test, they wait. They are in this system and in this structure where they are pretty much kind of hardwired to understand that they're going to have a new teacher every year. And so they don't have the same teachers unless it's an extracurricular like a sport or something of that nature, or theater or band. But they are used to kind of restarting this process over and over and over again. And so in order to break past that barrier or break past that wall, you have to get past their observations. You have to get past them testing the waters with you. And then you have to get past them just waiting on you to mess up. I mean, in all honesty, students are hardwired to just kind of wait for your downfall before they can trust you. And if it doesn't happen, then they're like, hey, well, maybe this is something. Like, maybe I can trust this person. So students are constantly asking, are you safe? Will you stay? Are you the same person next month? This makes me think of a kind of a crazy story that happened in our youth group, but I had a 6th grader at the time, where I'm with the high school, and so I still interact with the 6th and 7th and 8th, but I don't teach them outside of Sunday school. And I had a 6th grader one time come up to me, and he was like, "Hey man, like, do you ever get mad? Like, I don't know. I've never seen you get mad before. And it was just one of those things, is like, that was his testing. That was his patiently waiting. That was his observation, because something in him said, well, if he doesn't get angry, which is probably linked to home, if we're honest, um, if he doesn't get angry, then he's worthy of my trust. There's something that kind of cycled in his head, and that's what makes sense to him. And it's not the same with every kid, but kids are observing, they're testing, and they're waiting to see how you respond to things. And that was his answer to that response, was, you don't ever get mad. Like, I've never seen you mad. Do you get mad? Like, students have watched adults leave. Students have watched adults fail. Students have watched adults make stupid decisions. So, students are guarded and students are waiting to make sure that we are trustworthy before that relationship starts to grow and real discipleship happens. Like I said, they've seen leaders burn out. They've seen and experienced inconsistency at home, at school, even in church. Trust isn't assumed, it's earned. So, I kind of like a question to kind of frame today's conversation is, would students describe me as steady? Am I the same in and out as I am when I get there? Like, do students see me and see something that is constant? That's something that they can fall back on? Or am I kind of ebb and flow with the wind, up and down? Sometimes I'm fun, sometimes I'm not, sometimes I'm angry, sometimes I'm not. Like, what is your steadiness? Where are you? And how steady, or what does steadiness look like in your ministry?
Yeah.
Where might we be confusing enthusiasm with reliability? I've heard this phrase a couple times of like, oh, well, they're fun, but fill in the blank.
And then on the other side of that, like, oh man, they know the word. They're somebody I can trust as like a really good discipler, but man, they're just really dry and kind of hard, So
Yeah.
It's like, where's the balance, I guess, in all of that? I know that's something I've certainly struggled with, just even in my own, is I tend to be, you and I both really are more in like, there are a time and place for everything. And so, when we talk about games and fun and stuff like that, love to have fun, love to fellowship, love to do all of that. But when it's time for teaching, let's lock in, And so trying to find ways to balance that when I think it's safe to say, when our default is, I may only have this much time with you today. Let's get to what matters. And not to say that fun doesn't matter, but sometimes I got to remind myself that programming's fun in the midst of it is really important too. And
Sure.
Even if it's just like a small thing. And so, if I know I'm not going to have like a full-on game, how can I make the time where we're just sitting down eating food, how can I make that fun and engaging, so that they still feel like, we're so quote unquote like scratching the itch there too, when I know that we're not going to have time for a game or whatever. So
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely. And I think that's something that, but it's one of those things that students fall to expect. And like they get to the point to where if you change what is expected, then they're like, oh wait, hold on, wait. And so a lot of times students will fall in line with how you do your ministry, and students will grow to love the way that you do your ministry. If you do games, that's great. As David kind of said, me and him both don't do it on our main meeting night, just because of time constraints, and consistency. We have, at least my ministry, I've said this a bunch of times, but we have game nights and we have normal nights. We do game nights once a month where it's some activity or some high energy activity, something of that nature. But then everything else, like we are doing what we can to just kind of build and focus on the things that are the core. And so, like, kids come to know that. Kids don't ask for games on Wednesday nights because they know we don't do games on Wednesday nights. We do have free time before we get started, and we have a pool table and a ping pong table, and they goof around and they socialize and do all that fun stuff, and it's just a free hour. But quite honestly, we tried to put games in that free hour a couple years ago, and it absolutely flopped because all the kids were like, no, like, we're going to just talk. It's fine. And so like we're like, okay, that's fine. And so students have come to grow accustomed to our practice, our plan, the structure of how we do things. And now kids look forward to it. They know that social time is like they have to show up early to do social time. We start at 6 o'clock. We even have a timer that pops up on our screen. That's a 5-minute timer before we start worship. To where kids know, and when that timer goes off, the lights go off, we're diving into worship. And so I think the thing is like and we talked about this a second ago, and we're about to go in a little bit more detail. Trust isn't built in those huge moments, or it's not really, it's rarely, excuse me. I'm not going to say it can't be, but trust is rarely built in big moments. It's built in small repetition. And so when we do these small repetitions of small things over and over and over, when we're looking at like building this trust, we really, really have to focus on the mindset and the idea of these 3 core trust builders. We already mentioned this one, but consistency is the trust builder. Students have to know that you're reliable, and consistency shows that. If you do this, if you're the same in and out, like we talked about a second ago, showing up when you said you would, being emotionally stable, not over promising and under delivering, students notice. Students notice who miss small group regularly. Students notice who cancel often. Students notice who's distracted while they're listening to someone. So if you are there for your students, and for the ones that are just listening on audio, I did the quotation fingers. But if you are just physically there and not mentally there in your conversations, students will know. They are the fastest receptors of false or lying or like misconception. Like, I don't think there's a generation that's picked up on it faster. And so with that, they desire and crave that consistency, but it has to be through authenticity, and being real with them. Consistency says you matter enough for me to plan around you, which I think is a really, really good statement. Secondly, confidentiality. So consistency and then confidentiality. Nothing erodes trust faster than careless words. To continue that conversation with the 6th grader, my response was, well, man, I care about you and I care about the people in this room way too much for me to lose my cool. If I get upset, I might lose my chance of sharing the gospel with you or anybody else in this room. And for me, that's not worth it. And that's how I finished that conversation, showing that like I value you way more than my desire or my need to blow up about something stupid. I don't do that. It's really not me. But I was like, yes, I get mad. I get mad at my kids. I get mad like when stuff doesn't go my way. Sometimes everybody gets mad, dude. I said, but it is not worth me being mad here. So I don't. Because that could ruin an opportunity for me to share the gospel with someone. And he goes, oh, well, that's cool. Like, that's deep. Of course, 6th grade boy. I mean, but so the thing is, though, is like when you have these confidentiality moments, when you have these discussions, you have to explain up front that confidentiality only goes a certain length.
Yeah.
There are safety issues that require escalation. If you are in the state of Texas and you're listening to this, you're a mandatory reporter, as well as many other states. I just can't list those off for you, but you should know the legal requirements for the state that you're in.
Yeah.
In the state of Texas, if you hear something that causes danger to them or someone else around them,
You have to.
you have to report it legally or you can go to prison. Okay. The other side of that is we also have students that really, really like to gossip. And I don't know if you've ever had, David, this idea, but I've had it a couple times in my youth ministry of the prayer request that is secretly gossip that they just want to share with others. And so we have to work on this idea that, hey, respect is a part of confidentiality. And if it's a
Mm-hmm.
genuine prayer request, then it needs to be a genuine prayer request, because gossip disguised as a prayer request destroys credibility.
Yeah. And one thing that's really cool, and this culture was built before I got here, which is rare, at least in my experience. But um, we actually have a culture of students that are not afraid um, to shut down um, gossip, which is really cool. I've got two students in particular that the moment someone starts to gossip about another person, whether that be through prayer or just in general, um, one really really good is he's never afraid to say, guys, we're not going to gossip about other people. He's also very quick to say, do not name names. If you're sharing a concern, that you should never say a name. And then the other thing, which is unrelated but kind of related in the sense of that student leadership, is he's very quick to tell students to get off their phones. When we're trying to be engaged and stuff like that, he's not afraid to say, guys, let's let's lock in, let's dial in and pay attention, because we don't need to miss this. This is important stuff. And so,
Yeah.
that's number one, just having an incredible student. But I also know that Nick before me really poured into him, and that's a huge credit. Shout out to Nick Clifton. I don't know if he even listens to this, but um,
Probably not. He's too
probably
good
not.
for
But
us.
but but he is both of our friends. So if he happens to be one of those guys that's listening, I
I'm going to
really
share
I'll
this
say
episode
this.
with him now.
I'll say this. I'm not even going to share the episode. I'm just going to straight up say this. Nick Clifton, if you watch this, text us a thumbs up, because I'm pretty sure he wouldn't want to do a whole text message anyway. Just a thumbs up would be all I need. But anyway, clearly he's done a great job of pouring into the students that we have here, and man, that's an incredible thing. But I've had to consistently build that culture everywhere I've gone, where I'm like, guys, we got to stop with the gossip, because we all know. The funny thing is, at least in my experience, and Brent, you might say completely different, but it seems like the gossip that I've seen in the church has been so much heavier on the adult side than the youth side, which seems odd to me.
100%.
You would think that students and kids would be the ones that are like constantly gossiping and stuff like that, because we know it happens in the schools. But I'll tell you, man, I've seen more relationships get destroyed because of parking lot gossip from adults than I've ever seen from a student. I can
Yep.
name probably two situations in my 20 plus years of ministry where gossip actually hurt somebody in our youth ministry, but I couldn't even tell you the sheer amount of times that I've seen parking lot gossip destroy churches,
Yeah.
from an adult standpoint. So I don't know what that says about us. Maybe it just
Yeah.
goes back to the point that you made earlier, is that these students are always testing, and I apologize for the congestion. Um, but they're always seeing how we're going to react to certain situations and testing, and if we're not careful, that parking lot gossip, which I know us as youth pastors, senior pastors, children's pastors, all of that, we get dragged into that a lot, because it comes down to like politics a lot of times. Like, hey,
Yeah.
the church wants to do this thing. would you get on our side and basically tell your pastor that we shouldn't do this, or whatever that happens. We could do a whole series on that, but we're not going to. Um, but we got to be careful with that.
Yeah.
We need to. I don't know. I'm off in the weeds here, but I guess if I'm going to land the plane in that is we need to not be afraid to say the things that need to be said, and in situations like that, especially when it comes to like gossip, whether it's in our student ministry or
Yeah.
the church in general, we need to step up and be leaders and say,
Yeah.
guys, we need to be positive. We need to be
Yeah.
unified as a church, as a youth ministry, as a as a body of Christ. We need to come together and be unified, and we don't need to be
Yeah.
tearing down other people. That's biblical.
Yeah.
If you're a youth pastor, you should be able to point to several places where that's biblical. So all I'll
Yeah.
say is we've got to be more positive. We've got to be more unified. The
Yeah.
world, if you've paid any attention to the post Super Bowl halftime show crap, um, we're very, very divided. And we need to be agents of showing people what it means to come together and to be unified and to be positive instead of playing into that culture.
Yeah. No, and I mean, and that boils back down to just confidentiality and consistency. You need to have a consistent response to gossip in your group, and you need to be clear that gossip ruins confidentiality. Like both of those are tried and true. And so the other half of this though is you have the I mean, let's just go for two different scales of concerns that students may share. You have the high schooler that's like, "Hey, I walked in on my dad beating my mom the other day." Then you have the sixth grader that's like, "Hey, call me as soon as you can. This is a life and death situation." You call him back and he's like, "Hey, I left my Xbox cable at the church." And so with that, I think both need to be addressed as serious concerns. Both need to be addressed with a level of seriousness. And so we really need to develop like healthy language to answer and respond to all of these. And I think the healthy language kind of that I would use is just this mindset of I won't share this unless someone else is in danger. Okay? If that ever happens and I have to share it, I will tell you before I tell someone else. And I think with that there is some really, really healthy boundaries. I think you establish this consistency and confidentiality like we were talking about. And you really just kind of have to focus on just this mindset that like students, if the students have developed this trust in you, then ultimately they're going to be okay with your decision. They might not like it immediately, but most of the time they will come back and be grateful for what you have done when you have to disclose those confidential moments that are a threat to themselves or a threat to others. I've had a couple of those through my time in ministry. I've had a youth kid call about a friend of theirs that said that they were going to hurt themselves. I have had kids personally in youth group that had talked about hurting themselves. And so with that dynamic, like the confidentiality has to be there, but we need to develop that healthy language to where you say, "Hey, look, unless someone is in danger, you or someone else, I will keep this a secret. But if someone is in danger, I have to tell someone else. I have to report it to the proper authorities so we can make sure that everybody's safe in the situation." Trust grows when students know that their vulnerability will not become content. And so David brought up a good point. Don't use names. If you ever do retell a story, don't use names. Don't use opportunities where like names could pop up later. I don't use names unless I have permission from the person. And so the thing is like students will build trust when they know that they can trust you with their story. when you won't use that as something to make you look better or to make them look worse or anything to that nature. And so, not sharing names, like David said earlier, is a very, very big deal. And so, kind of a reflection question for this thought, though, is how do we train our volunteers? Going back to that consistency mindset, how do we train our volunteers to handle student stories with maturity? Because, like I said, the level of seriousness between my two stories earlier about the high school student and the sixth grader, they probably were pretty similar. Because seriousness is subjective. And so, what might not seem serious to you could be incredibly serious to them. So, how do we train our volunteers to handle student stories with maturity?
So I was going to save this for a later point, but I think this goes really well with what you're saying. Is like I think it comes down to being honest um, with your volunteers to say, hey, every moment that we get with these students matters, and when your students see that they can trust you with the little things, they'll trust you with the big things. If you will trust them with the things that seem so insignificant to what your goals may be or your expectations might be, and there's a whole talk there too, just in our expectations. Sometimes we can get so focused on, and I hear this every. It seems like so you guys know Brent and I are involved with camp ministry, and every morning we do like a 7 o'clock, 7:30, whatever meeting with all of our counselors and volunteers and stuff like that. And one of the things you hear as we go around the circle, and this is not at all a bad thing. I don't want to make it sound like it, but what you hear a lot of times is, man, we're just really struggling to get the students to open up. Like, and what's it gonna like? And I think part of it is like we have this expectation when they come to camp that they're gonna show up and they're gonna start sharing their stories and they're gonna do all these things and that you're gonna have lots of dialogue and stuff, and we want that, and we sort of measure success on whether or not they're really talkative. And I don't even know if we necessarily care that much about what is being said as long as something is being said. And I think and Brent and I gently remind every single year, every camp. I mean, we probably sound like a broken record at this point, but talking doesn't necessarily mean or doesn't mean that you're not being successful. Not going deep does not mean that you're not being successful. It just might mean your group is more introspective and they are taking it in, and you're planting seeds that maybe won't grow for years from now. But your job is just to be consistent and to show up. And so I think in training our volunteers, it's just really vital to say, hey, if they know that they can trust you with the little things, if they go on and on and on about their cat, and you could care less about cats because you think the cats are the devil, like I do, showing that you're listening and that you care and that you're actively engaging in the things that might seem little to you but are big to them in this particular moment. you know, it may be weeks from now, it may be months from now, it may be years from now, but you ask a really important question and that student steps up and blows everybody away with their response. How did you get to that moment? It's because you consistently built trust in that student. And so I think training our volunteers to know that if you are faithful with the small things, the small moments, I might get 30 seconds in this moment, but they
Yeah.
hear that, I think it matters. To give you a practical example of what that looks like, because I know in a situation like this, at least people like my wife, they want kind of a step one, step two, step three kind of thing. But I don't necessarily have that, but I do have an example. So this last Sunday, I got an opportunity. Again, Brent knows this as when you're wearing multiple hats on a Sunday morning, it can be really challenging to get out and have conversations because we're both youth and worship. And so as soon as it's over, you're finishing the song and then you're turning stuff off to save batteries and all that other stuff. You're, kind of, you want to be able to get to lunch too, just like everybody else. And so a lot of times we don't get a lot of opportunities to like actually talk to people after worship. Not because we don't want to, it's just because we're we're working, and well, this last Sunday I got a lot more time before and after, which is kind of rare and really special, honestly. But I had a particular person in our church that just had a couple of questions, was checking in on me and previous conversations that we've had, and so sorry, was just asking lots of questions. Well, I noticed that I had a student that was kind of standing off to the side, and it was clear to at least to me that he was trying to talk to me. And I was trying to find a segue to get the student kind of into the conversation, but this particular person was really just really drawn in on the conversation, and I didn't want to be rude, and so um, I took a moment and just said, "If you'll excuse me for just a second, can I text the leader real quick?" And he's like, "Yeah, absolutely." And so I texted one of my volunteers, actually the volunteer, so to speak, like kind of my right hand woman, and just said, "Hey, will you go check on this student?" Because after a while, that student had kind of walked away, just probably realizing I have the time in this moment, and I just inwardly I don't want to be rude to this adult, but I also don't want to be rude to this student, and that's certainly something that we all juggle a lot. Your volunteers will juggle it too, and so but it wasn't a situation where I could just invite him into the conversation, because the questions he was asking were personal to me, and it would have been disrespectful to include anybody into that conversation. And so
Yeah.
anyway, I asked our this volunteer to go check on this person, and then out of, I guess, probably a couple minutes later, the student shows back up and just kind of sits down in the pew next to us and just kind of waits. And as the conversation kind of started to lull and change, I was like, "Ooh, this is a great opportunity to bring him in." And so then I brought him into the conversation, and eventually the person needed to leave, so he left, and then I was able to transition into the conversation with the student. And it ended up not being a big deal. It was like just wanted to talk football and just kind of catch up and stuff like that, which was great. But I
Yeah.
was not sure if the student was okay, and so in that moment, I was able to sort of slowly juggle, find a way to make sure that the student is okay, and reached out to, and then when I had the opportunity to bring them into the conversation, I did. And so maybe training your volunteers in a simple way, or maybe it's just as simple as saying, "Hey, if you don't mind, can I text one of my leaders something real quick, just before I forget," kind of situation. He didn't have to know what was going on. It still protected the student, because the student could have had something going on and the other person didn't need to know that. And so it's kind of one that just, can I just shoot off a quick text real quick? And in doing so, I was able to allow my volunteer to check on the student. And that student was able to also know, like, "Oh, hey, he wasn't ignoring me. He sent Sandra, I shouldn't have
Yeah.
said her name, but regardless, sent volunteer to make sure I was okay, and then still took the time afterwards." So now it's not just that he may have, if I don't know that he was feeling this, but if he was, it would have gone from a situation where the student might have felt ignored to knowing there's two that loved him and cared
Yeah.
about him enough to make sure, especially when it was just something silly. But that little bit of intentionality to juggle multiple situations
Yeah.
showed that student that I still cared, my volunteers still cared, and we were still able to get that time.
Yeah.
And he was able to meet that adult, because they didn't know each other prior to that. So in a sense, it kind of turned into three adults getting to kind of speak into him and speak life. Because this adult is definitely one who speaks life into people, and so he was like, "Oh, hey, I've seen you around. It seems like you're a good leader." So it ended up turning into a big kind of
Yeah.
thing. And so sometimes just I don't exactly know how to put that into terms that would be training necessarily, but being a specific situation where a student you can build trust with the student through a real life scenario, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Well, and
Maybe you
I
have
think it
better
goes back
words.
to seriousness. Like treating everything with maturity. Because ultimately there's 100 different ways you could have done that interaction, but you showed the seriousness of a recognizing that he needed to talk and going out of your way to make sure that someone checked in. B, following up with that student directly, And sometimes we have to be honest. I mean, but I think honesty is something that we have to do on both sides. Like we have to be honest and we have to be upfront with students. And so we need to be relational like you were in that statement. But then also we need to show integrity through honesty too. I had a student yesterday or 2 days ago text me and ask if I could write a letter of recommendation for them for a class project on them teaching. Um, and I said, I don't think I've ever seen you teach, so I can't write that. And like, sure, I could have probably just fudged a thing, but I wanted to show the honesty and the integrity side of like, I'm not going to write something that I don't have personal witness on. Like, and so I'm a firm believer that and this is probably against some protocol somewhere, but reference letters, I'm a firm believer if a student asks me for a reference letter, I write it to where and send it to wherever I'm supposed to. But before I send it, I copy and paste it and send it to the student too. Um, and so when the student reads, they know exactly what I said. They know exactly my thoughts, exactly how I worded stuff. And so a lot of times, especially for the students that are worthy of writing recommendation letters, it's a good practice. There are some students that I don't have a relationship at all that come to me at the very end of the year and they're like, hey,
Yeah.
like can you write me a letter of recommendation? And I'm like, yeah, sure. I mean, and I'm honest. But like for the ones that have been a part of the youth program, for the ones that have been in and out that I've built relationships with, I am very, very open and honest with my thoughts and my
Hmm.
like with my recommendations for them.
How would that be
So
against a protocol, just out of curiosity?
I don't know. There's a lot of secrecy with recommendation letters. There's
Is
supposed
there
to be.
really?
I mean, depending on what they're for. Sometimes the organization doesn't want you to see them. They want them like sealed and like stuff like that to where like the you don't actually get to see it. There's a ton of different. It really
I
depends
didn't
on the
realize that.
organization or the person.
I
Yeah.
because I do the same thing you do. Like if I'm gonna
Yeah.
brag on a student, I want them to know about it, and
Yeah.
not for brownie points for me, because I want them to feel built up and encouraged, and to know like, because sometimes they're, I mean, especially when you get to senior year, they're filling out so many applications
Mhm.
um, and scholarships, and many of which they'll get rejected from, unless they're just a
Yeah.
really like good, smart student.
Yeah.
This is a hard time to be a student, as we know, because rejection in any form is not fun. And to
Yep.
know that that there is somebody who really believes in them, especially if they don't get into
Yeah.
if they've got a list of five schools and they only get into one of the five, they were rejected by more schools than they were accepted to, and they're excited to be accepted to that. But to be rejected by four other schools, some students, they don't care. They're kind of just like, hey, I just want to get into a school. Some
Yeah.
students, they form their whole identity around it. And
Yeah.
so I think sometimes to be able to hear
Yeah.
something positive that might have led to that can really help build a student up.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, and I think
I
that
was
I
just
think that
curious
bleeds
about that because
into
I
a
was like, I hope
yeah.
that's not illegal, but I always show a
No,
student.
it bleeds into our next point of those 3 points that build trust. The last one is emotional safety. If a student feels like you're not going to say things behind their back, this is just one way to address that. Like say like, look, I wouldn't say anything behind you that I wouldn't say to your face, good or bad. And so with the good, here's what I said, or with the bad, here's what I said. I did a thing a couple years ago, and I don't do it very often. But I mean, students are so influenced by what people say, like you just said, or rejection, or acceptance, or anything to that nature. And I had high school students a couple years ago being like, "Well, hey, what's your thoughts about me?" And I was honest. Like, I was like, I think you're a great kid. I think you're influenced way too easy, and you're very, very quick to sway on what crowd you hang with, depending on where you want to be, or something to that nature. And so sometimes I wasn't beating around the bush. I was being honest. But then others, I'm like, and stuff like that is far, far low in comparison to how well you carry yourself. Stuff like that. And so like, I mean, there's so many different ways you can do that, but like building that emotional safety, part of that is like just being honest with them. Students trust adults who don't overreact. Students trust adults who don't shame. There's a difference between being truthful in correction and being shameful or throwing shame.
Especially
And
publicly. Do that privately, guys.
just
Please.
don't, no shame at all. I mean, like you shouldn't be shaming a kid at all.
Well, yeah,
Um,
I mean,
yeah,
if you're going to build someone up in the sense of saying,
yeah,
"Hey, this is something you need to work on," that's not something you should do in front of the entire group.
yes,
Um,
100%.
Sorry.
No, you're good. And with that, I mean, just going back to me talking to those students about what I thought about them. Our high school goes and eats afterwards. We've done it for years. We just go to a random restaurant in town and just spend like an extra hour. Um, and during that time was when I was talking to kids, and I'd pull them to a table one on one, and most of them were like nervous about what I'd say. And most of the ones that were incredibly nervous were the ones that were rock stars that were absolutely killing it, and I was super super proud of them. Um, and so it's just this dynamic of like honesty is a huge deal, but I do agree honesty in private, private, but like within
Within eyes and ears.
within eyes, maybe not ears. I mean, just
Yeah.
depending on the conversation.
Well,
But
I mean other adults.
yeah,
Not
with
students.
at least
Sorry.
within eye shot of other leaders, the privacy needs to happen, which goes back to the whole you gotta be careful and take care of yourself. But students also, going back to that, students also trust adults who don't panic when hard topics surface. A lot of times students don't want to share what they're going through due to how they think you will respond. So, if a student confesses a doubt, if a student confesses a sin, or if a student confesses a struggle, your first reaction is going to help form their theology of God. I don't go to church anymore because the church hurt me. That's a theology of God framing. It's incorrect, and we can go into a whole different episode on that. But emotional safety sounds like, hey, thanks for telling me this. I know that took a lot of guts. Or, hey, that really makes sense. Or, I'm really glad you trusted me with that. That's a big deal, and I appreciate that. If students fear your reaction, they will hide their reality.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
100%. I used to like just for your own personal training, and another thing you can train your volunteers in. Early on in my ministry, I quite literally would practice reacting to things in the mirror. I would see what my face looks like because my youth pastor did a fantastic job with me, telling me like straight up, like the way that you react when somebody tells you something hard will make or break a situation. Period. If someone says, "Hey, I'm dealing with the porn issue," and you look at them and go, "Oh," like that, they're gonna go, "Oh, they
I
think
shouldn't have told you that.
I shouldn't have told you that. I'm scum." And just like you said, if we're their link to theology, if we're their link to their faith in God, if we react this way, how much more do they think God will react that way? And God
Yeah.
already knows. And being able to practice in the mirror, if someone says, "Hey, I'm dealing with a lust issue," I went to a party and got high, like super super high, and I crashed the car and I broke my leg, and it's a whole thing, and I'm just terrified and all this other stuff. I mean, sometimes they'll pile on a whole bunch of things at once, and my reaction needs to be just this, just listening, nodding a little bit, and just being really intentional. Try to keep that eye contact with them if you can, and just really focusing on what they're saying. And then when you're done, yeah, just like you said, like, really glad you trust me with that. Like, I'm honored that you took the time to trust me and to care
Yeah.
enough to have that conversation. And then you can go into whatever the next steps may be. And maybe the best thing you could do at that point is just go, hey, let's take a beat and let's pray. God, will
Yeah.
you, and do that, or maybe a student comes up to you and they're like, hey, I got something really hard to share. In that moment, the first thing that my mind does, the first thing I do is I don't close my eyes and do the whole thing, but inwardly I'm like, God, give me the words, give me the ears to listen, the heart to understand, and the ears. I think I got that out of order. Basically, I
Words to
pray.
speak.
Words to speak. Thank you. My focus is gone, guys. But yeah, give me the right words to speak, the ears to listen, the heart to understand. In this moment,
Yep.
God speak through me. That's how I always end the prayer. God speak through me.
Yeah.
And it's just a quick, simple way to where they can feel heard. Sometimes we're gonna react the wrong way, and we have to apologize in those moments. I think again, it goes back to owning when we mess up. And we've talked a lot about that on the podcast, but those quick little prayers, man, letting the Holy
Yeah.
Spirit take over, then the pressure is kind of off a little bit. A
Yeah.
little bit.
No, definitely. And so with that, I mean, we definitely try to do this regularly in our conversations as well. Let's just real quick. I mean, we're all familiar with these stories, but let's look at how Jesus built trust. So Mark 8, specifically Mark 8, 32. After Jesus basically predicts his death and resurrection, Peter takes him to the side and rebukes Jesus, which Peter is just the star student, like time and time again. Like I always say, if Peter was still loved by Jesus, we're all good. So Peter rebukes Jesus in Mark 8. Luke 22, Peter denies Jesus 3 times. We all are familiar with that side. And then John 21, Jesus restores Peter. So what can we learn from this? Here's things that Jesus did not do. He did not shame publicly. He did not disown quickly. He did not withdraw relationally. He corrected firmly. He stayed present. He restored intentionally. I think the restoration of Peter is one of the coolest stories in the entire New Testament because Jesus is intentional with exactly how it's done. Peter, do you love me? Peter, do you love me? Peter, do you love me? Take care of my sheep. Trust deepens when correction is wrapped in relationship, when truth is delivered without humiliation. Another person to think through the relationships biblically also, I mean, consider Paul and Timothy. Paul didn't just give Timothy instructions, he gave him shared life, mentorship, and affirmations. 2 Timothy 1:5 says, I am reminded of your sincere faith. Paul names what he sees before he corrects what needs growth. I am encouraged. I am reminded of your sincere faith, but there's still things to work on. So how do we correct students in ways that persevere trust? Persevere. Excuse me. Wrong word. How do we correct students in ways that preserve trust rather than fracture it? How do we correct students in a way that maintains trust instead of breaking it? Because let's be honest, sometimes trust breaks. Trust will break it with someone at some point. Maybe a leader misspeaks. Maybe a student feels exposed. Maybe a boundary was left unclear. Maybe a leader leaves abruptly, which is something we can't control.
Yeah.
There's 2 unhealthy responses to this: defensiveness and withdrawal. Don't do those. If you get corrected, don't be defensive. I struggle with this a lot just because it's a pride thing. And that is my immediate gut reaction. If someone tells me, "Hey, you did this wrong," my immediate reaction is like, "Oh, well, you think I did this wrong?" Like, and it's something that is a struggle for me to this day. Healthy response is repair. Repair sounds like, "Hey, I'm sorry about that. I handled that poorly. Can we reset?" Leaders often think if I admit fault, then I lose my authority. Nobody
Exact
trusts
opposite.
me anymore because I've lost my authority. In all reality, everybody's watching how you fail.
Yeah.
But in reality, repair increases credibility. Students don't expect perfection. We said this earlier. They expect authenticity.
They'll respect you so much more.
Yep. If trust is delayed, don't try to force vulnerability, which is what camp does a lot. That's one of my big
Mm,
things with
yeah.
camp.
Yeah.
It's my biggest struggle because camp tries to push that envelope too much. Doesn't matter what camp you're a part of, camps are all guilty of it.
Yep.
If
Emotionalism.
trust is delayed, you need to avoid forcing vulnerability. You need to stay consistent and let time do its work. Relationships and trust both take time.
Hmm. Be patient. Trust the process.
Yes.
I could certainly speak into it a little bit. I left a church that I was there for 10 years, and people knew who I was, and they trusted me, and I built a lot of relationships, and I was one of those people who people knew they could go to. Brent is in that situation in his current church. I've been here for almost 2 years, and sometimes I have to remind myself I've only been here for 2 years, and that building relationships here is going to continue to be a challenge for the next at least year, if not, couple of years, because I'm in that window. I'm firmly in that window of people, like whether it's 9 months or 18 months, I am still in that window of people going, "Hey, is he going to stay?"
Yep.
And this church has been a little bit of a revolving door lately, for different reasons, both healthy and unhealthy. And so sometimes I got to remind myself, slow down, be patient, be patient. You may be that person who's been where you're at for a year or two, and you're like, "Man, why does it feel like the wheels aren't turning?" And I'm trying, and
Yeah.
I'm giving it all my effort, and I've been at every game, and I've been consistent, and I keep doing all the things that you're saying, but you're frustrated, or are. And let's be honest, a lot of churches push us too much, but our numbers aren't going up, and I'm getting pressure by my parents and my leadership
Yep.
and my pastor, and I know how hard it is. Be consistent, keep
Yeah.
driving it, make sure people understand the mission, and as long as they understand, like I said, and I know Brent got it from someone else, and we both talked about it and credited it a lot, and we'll credit it again, but we win when a student takes a step in their faith. Being able to define the win for people in those moments when you feel like, man, we're not gaining the ground we want, we're not meeting the expectations that we're trying to meet, being
Yeah.
consistent to say, "Hey, did a student take a step towards their faith today? Did they invite a friend? Did someone get baptized? Did someone,
Yeah.
those kind of things?" And they don't always have to be big moments. It could just be a student. You sort of see a breakthrough in a student that goes, "Hey, I've been really struggling with this thing, but I feel like I'm finally on the other side of it." That's a huge win, and you celebrate it.
Mm-hmm.
Those little moments can be the things that keep us going consistently and keep building patience and trust, because that window, as frustrating as it can be sometimes, like when you feel like you've consistently shown up and you've worked hard and you've done these things, you can't control the moment when they start to trust you. All you can
Yeah.
do is keep giving them opportunities to get to that point. Keep giving the opportunities, keep allowing them to trust you, and I promise you, at some point it's going to happen. I don't know how, I don't know when. Um, I apologize for anybody who might be feeling nauseous from Brent's camera right now. But keep going, keep being consistent. It's going to be okay. I promise. And if you need someone to talk to about it, please, we say this all the time. We have established this to be a community. Um, Come talk to us. We would love to, because I'm right there with you. Um, I've certainly felt those feelings this very week, this very morning, of just like, man, when am I going to get to that point?
Yeah.
Keep being steady, keep being consistent. It matters. I promise.
Sure. No, and so like you said, and we said it earlier, trust is built in the small things, not the big ones. It's rarely built in the big things. Trust is rarely built in months. Trust is built in years. And so David, if you're listening to this and David was talking about that window and you're like, what window? I have no idea. So most youth ministry people that have studied youth ministry, at least, they will say that the average duration of a youth pastor apparently now is between 9 and 18 months, which is wild to me. But 9 and 18 months is the average life of a youth pastor. Okay. With that being said, youth ministry will not take efficient hold of relationships, and it's been once again researched and studied, for the first 3.5 years. So, why 3.5 years? Let me explain that real quick. Okay. One of the things that I tell youth pastors all the time when they're stepping into new programs, they're like, well, like, if you can give me some advice or tell me what to do, pour everything you have into your junior high. Work to keep the high school that stay. You still work to build relationships with them, but in all reality, relationships take time, and you have to be aware of the fact that you're probably not going to build efficient relationships with at least sophomores and older. Sophomores, you might catch the end of their senior year. Freshmen and lower is your goal. You are focused and you are driving to make those relationships count and those relationships matter. Okay? Because those 6th grade through freshmen or 7th grade through freshmen or 5th grade through freshmen, whatever your youth group does, that is going to be the youth ministry that you thrive under. Because it takes that long for trust to be built, for parents to buy in, for leaders to see your worth your salt. It takes time to develop and build this. This is where youth ministry collides with impatience. And unfortunately, not all impatience is from you. Not all impatience is from your situations or you, like your personal stuff. Sometimes it's impatience from your church. Sometimes it's impatience from other things that are kind of external influences.
Problems with the person before you.
Mm-hmm. Work towards making that 3.5 years. I guarantee you will find a rhythm and stick with it. You cannot do ministry in a church for 2 years and call it quits. And not if you want to build relationships. So, with that being said, you might invest in a student who seems disengaged. You might pour into someone who drifts away. You might stay consistent and you might see very little fruit for that first little bit. And like David said, it is frustrating because you're like, I'm doing all the things and nobody's listening. But something to consider, how many seeds did Jesus plant before the resurrection clarified everything?
There's a sermon there. Just Galatians, in that statement. Man,
I know.
That's so good.
Galatians 6:9, let us not grow weary in doing good. Trust grows when trust grows.
If you don't give up.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Trust
you gotta
grows.
Finish that verse. It's too good.
Trust grows when students realize you're not going anywhere. So here's some practical encouragements. Hopefully these stick, and then David's going to close us out. Stay in the role longer than stay in the same role It feels impressive to stay in the same role longer. Okay? Keep showing up to the same group over and over and over. Let familiarity become formation.
Mm-hmm.
I've talked about it a time or two on here. I'm in the process of becoming ordained in the Global Methodist Church. Part of that process, as the Methodists have always been a little more painstakingly burdensome in their ordination process, but it's also great growth and great opportunities. Don't get me wrong, that's not all negative. But part of that is I had to get a psych eval, and it's not to see if I'm crazy. It's to see how I tick to make sure that the um, church can like come alongside me and help me grow. And so they need to know how. And so with that, I had mentioned that I've been at my church for 9 years, and both of the ladies that did my psych eval are both older. They're both counselors, and they both said 9 years. Holy cow! Shoot for that.
It blows people's mind.
It's not like oh, look at me, I've been here for 9 years. Like like it is. My job is easier now because I've built consistent trust.
Yeah, I
The
mean, when I
kids know
came,
what we're doing. The kids
hmm
are like they know where we're going, they know what we're doing, they know how we're doing it. Trust has been built, credibility has been earned, and now I have an easier job
yeah,
because of longevity.
yeah, I mean, that was one of the selling points when I came here. Is um, in our interview with the leadership council. I mean, they were like, by the way, I don't know if anybody really took time to look at his resume, but in case you didn't, he has been at his current church for 10 years. And every person in the room, like I saw three. I was kind of looking around seeing people's reaction. I saw three put their pen down and do this, and I was like, I just want all three of them. All
Yeah.
simply because I was willing to stay
Yeah.
in a church. Like
Yeah.
it show and to a church like this, it's never had a youth pastor that long, and I was
Yeah.
by far the longest tenured youth pastor at my old church. And it's one of those things. It's like, man, in a Methodist church especially, that has always been a revolving door for pastors,
Yeah.
because our system literally up until 2 years ago was built to be that way.
Yep.
Churches just have gotten tired of it. They're like, we
Mm-hmm.
want one person who's going to stay with us and really build a life here. They want to
Yep.
know that you care about their town and their church and their people. And so showing up and being
Yeah.
consistent. I mean, that could literally be the title of this podcast. Consistency matters. Like, it just does.
Yeah. Yeah.
They won't know that you care until you
Yeah.
continue to show up.
Students,
Words
parents,
don't.
churches. Yeah.
Yeah,
Students, parents, and churches trust leaders who outlast the trend cycle.
that's it. That's it.
I mean, that's it. Like, outlast the trend cycle is what we're saying. No, but it's hard. You don't understand my church. Outlast the trend cycle.
Push through it.
No, but you don't
Persevere.
understand. Like my youth group and the parents are already trying to get rid of me. Outlast the trend cycle.
Yep, we've both been there.
Mm-hmm.
We're not just giving you fluffy words. We promise. We've had those conversations with each other in the midst of those problems where
Yep.
I was like, I remember, where you were, and you remember where I was, and the
Yep.
conversations we've had in the midst of that, and we looked at each other and said, push through.
Yep.
That's what you need.
Because it's not about the parents. It's about the kids. I mean, in
Galatians
all
6:9
reality.
again. Let us
Yeah.
not grow weary in doing good. You will, like, hear this is a promise from God. You can take it to the bank. This is not me and Brent's words. You will reap a harvest if in all caps, bolded, if you do not give up. That is a promise of God. Take it to the bank, friends. You will reap a harvest if you don't give up. So don't grow weary in doing the things that you're doing, but trust the process. Trust that God is going to carry you through and deliver. And I promise you, you may think you'll never see it. I was in that position. At one point, I literally, and I told Brent this, I was like, I think God has called me to be Moses. I think I'm going to be that guy that helps a lot of other youth ministries succeed, and I'm never going to experience the promised land. I firmly believed it because I was beat down for so long. And then God goes, watch this. Boom, promised land. And I'm there. And I'm like, oh, this is refreshing. This is cool. Why? You got to keep pushing through. You got to persevere. It's important. It matters. All right. Any other
Yes.
thoughts, Brent, before?
Nope.
Okay.
Pray us
All
out,
right.
and we'll call it a day.
So we started this last week, and I just think it's really powerful. So we just wanna pray over you guys and your ministries, and remember, don't be afraid to reach out to us. We're a community. We hope and pray that each one of these episodes does something to help you or help your leaders or help someone in
Yeah.
your community. If you have a favorite episode, please share it with your ministry friends. I'm getting to a point where I don't even say youth ministry friends anymore because I know there are people who listen to it as senior pastors, children's pastors, volunteers, and all of that. So if you have somebody who would benefit, share the episode. And man, that means the world to us. We're totally a word of mouth. We don't pay for anything. And so we appreciate you guys continuing to support. So let us pray over you, and we'll catch you guys in the next one. Father God, we just thank you so much for your love, your grace, your mercy. Lord, we thank you for the opportunity just to have an open table conversation. Lord, as we are reminded that this table extends to so many people throughout Texas and other states and even other countries. God, what an incredible blessing it is to be able to sit down with friends and to discuss the inner works of the church and ultimately our love of and passion of seeing these students make a faith step towards you. God, that's our ultimate win. Lord, I pray for the person listening to this that is feeling beat down or discouraged. Maybe they're still in that window trying to build trust. Lord, I just pray that you would help them to be consistent, to be honest and vulnerable in those moments when they feel frustrated. Lord, that they would reach out, that they wouldn't keep that to themselves, but Lord, that they would reach out to somebody in their church that they can trust. If they don't have that, Lord, that maybe we can be that for them. But Lord, that they would reach out and just be vulnerable and to be honest about where they're feeling, God, and that you would just strengthen them, that you would encourage them, God, that you'd meet them right where they are and help them to see that the consistency, the faithfulness that it takes, the patience that it takes is so worth it, that they will reap a harvest if they don't give up. Lord, I pray that these ministry leaders wouldn't be weary of doing good, but Lord, that they would trust the process. And God, that you would just minister to them, that you'd build them up, that you would encourage them, that maybe somehow something that was said here would be an encouragement for them to just keep going, keep pushing through, keep persevering. God, you are so good. You're so kind. You're so faithful. Lord, we're so thankful for that. Lord, I pray as for all of those who have ministry tonight. I know the people will be listening to this on a Thursday, but whenever they meet again, God, that you would go before them and that they would have just such a wonderful night. And most importantly, Lord, that these students would experience and encounter you in a new and refreshing way. Father, we thank you so much for who you are. God, may you bless these leaders as they go and bless their churches. It's in your name we pray. Amen.